Hi guys! Today we'll be recapping a story called I Accidentally Saved the Male Lead's Brother. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot. Enjoy! It all starts with a lost boy in a forest, standing there alone in the middle of an eerie forest, asking for help. He is looking for his older brother while bursting into tears. Suddenly, a lovely lady emerges, witnessing the young boy sobbing in fear. Assuming he is lost, the kind-hearted woman contemplates helping him find his family. However, her intentions shift abruptly when the boy turns to face her, revealing his clothes drenched in dark red blood. Shock and fear grip her as she realizes the child is unmistakably soaked in blood, and her eyes widen further when she spots a familiar symbol on his coat. Her astonishment deepens when she recognizes the symbol from 3 years ago. Back then, Charlotte was a character in the novel The Duke's Contract Wife. However, her narrative ended tragically as she was struck by a truck, a common occurrence in romance fantasy novels. Yet, instead of meeting an afterlife, her soul traversed dimensions and inhabited a body of a baron's daughter. Strangely, after completing the book, she never encountered any mention or appearance of her character, indicating that she would now be living a reality outside the pages of the novel. As an ordinary noble instead of a female lead who would certainly endure all the hardships that a main character could ever possess, she is beyond glad to know that she's not a villainess nor a supporting character as well. Returning to the present, where Charlotte encounters the male lead's character, she remains hesitant, but the boy becomes increasingly hysterical. Unable to ignore his distress, she finally asks him what happened. Suddenly, a man named Caesar appears and aids them in the search of the lost boy's elder brother. Charlotte embraces the frightened child, attempting to offer comfort. It becomes apparent that there was an ambush, triggering Charlotte's fear of the events foretold in the novel. Deciding to take action, she brings the child named Theodore with her. Upon their arrival, she promptly orders a doctor, leaving the maids in a state of shock and concern. Charlotte introduces Theodore to her mother, and they decide to provide shelter and protection until someone comes to claim him. Little does Charlotte realize, this marks the beginning of her unexpected journey. Meanwhile, the older brother frantically searches for Theodore, expressing deep concern and instructing his servant to find the younger boy at all costs. Frustrated and blaming himself for letting Theo go alone, he contemplates his decisions. In the midst of his turmoil, a letter arrives from Charlotte containing the news he didn't expect. Minutes later, Caesar delivers the news about the said assassination. Upon hearing it, she can't help wondering why the events seem different from the novel. According to the original novel, Theo should have died. The mystery deepens as they discover that there are no fatal injuries, but instead, traces of magic linger around the scene. Charlotte, suspecting magical involvement, instructs Sir Caesar to summon a sorcerer from the neighboring estate. However, Caesar hesitates, citing the expense of hiring a sorcerer and their lack of funds. In response, Charlotte smiles and proposes a solution. Selling her jewelry, even if it means parting with gifts from her parents. She is determined to prioritize the safety of the Rania estate with her family. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted by Theo's loud voice, and the moment he sees Charlotte, he comes running to her. He seems scared and only wants Charlotte, whom he calls his big sister, around. Charlotte grants his request, and she begins to bathe Theo, who thoroughly enjoys the refreshing experience. After the bath, Charlotte dresses him in an adorable outfit. Theo looks so adorable in those pajamas holding his stuffed toy. As the night approaches, Charlotte suggests reading a bedtime story to Theo, who shows visible excitement at the idea. Choosing a tale about a wizard and his friend Celine, with a happy ending where they reconcile after facing challenges, Charlotte reads aloud. Turning her attention to her side, Charlotte observes Theo peacefully asleep, holding on to his stuffed toy. A sense of joy fills her as she reflects on the positive impact of meeting Theo. Yet, concerns linger as she notices his unease when she's not around. This unease is expected since he's surrounded by strangers, with Charlotte being the only person he trusts. In the midst of these thoughts, Charlotte recalls the tattoo she noticed on Theo's back. The realization surprises her as she learns that the Heinst family tattoos their members from a young age. Before she can delve deeper into her contemplations, Emma, one of her maids, knocks on the door with a worried expression. Upon hearing that Viscount Lotheon is in their house, Charlotte is taken aback. The Viscount's presence causes a commotion on the first floor as he actively searches for Charlotte. This unexpected visit adds tension to the once peaceful atmosphere, creating an uneasy feeling in the air. Meanwhile, Theo notices that Charlotte's gone, so he gets out of bed to look for her. Oh no, what if he gets hurt? Charlotte faces the Viscount, who stands his ground with a smug expression. He inquires about the proposal, an offer for Charlotte to marry him and become his wife to settle all debts concerning the Rania territory. Charlotte, feeling uneasy about the proposition, responds with assurance that she intends to repay all the debts over time without accepting his marriage proposal. The Viscount's disappointment becomes evident at her words. With determination in her voice, Charlotte firmly declines his offer, stating unequivocally that there is no way she would consider becoming his wife. The Viscount, caught off guard by her refusal, reacts impulsively and raises his hand as if to slap her. However, in an unexpected turn of events, Theo steps in between them to prevent the Viscount from harming Charlotte. In a surprising display, it appears that Theo, fueled by anger and a protective instinct for Charlotte, subconsciously creates a magical barrier to defend her. The Viscount screams in pain and threatens both Theo and Charlotte. He warns Charlotte about the debts, giving her only 2 days to pay. After his furious exit, Theo shares that he came looking for Charlotte because he misses her. They head to his room to sleep, but suddenly Theo collapses. Charlotte acts fast, preventing him from getting hurt. Feeling guilty, Charlotte stays by Theo's side despite the maid's suggestion to rest. Later, when talking to the doctor, there's no good news as they can't figure out why Theo collapsed. The nanny calls Charlotte with a worried, tearful voice. Unfortunately, Theo's fever has worsened and the news is grim. There's a possibility he might not make it through the night due to the severe fever. The terror on Charlotte's face grows as she hears this troubling information. No, that can't be! She rushes in, already in tears at the sight of him struggling. Theo calls to her, extending his arm to wipe her tears. Charlotte embraces him, assuring him that everything will be okay. Despite Theo's promise to protect her, her tears intensify when he doesn't respond. Overwhelmed, she cries herself to sleep beside him. When she wakes up, she finds herself next to Theo and realizes she dozed off. Thankfully, Theo's fever has improved. As Theo recovers, returning to his cheerful self, he enjoys eating his requested pudding. Suddenly, the servant informs her that Duke Heinst is in their mansion. Oh, such godly features! He looks so handsome! Duke Heinz exudes a commanding and masculine presence, surrounded by a dark aura that even intimidates the servants. The nanny advises Charlotte to retreat to her room, but she declines, feeling a sense of responsibility in the absence of her parents. With an assuring smile, Charlotte bravely descends the stairs with Theo in her arms. Theo's smile widens upon seeing his older brother. Charlotte recalls that Carlyle Heinst, Duke Heinst's second son, is Theodore Heinst's older brother. The two brothers share a reconciling hug, their embrace filled with palpable sense of longing. Theo beams with excitement in Carlyle's arms, while Charlotte quietly observes from the corner. Carlyle's sharp eyes fixate on her, leaving Charlotte stunned by his intimidating gaze. It's exactly the same as how the novel describes him, like a beast, akin to a wild wolf. Breaking the silence, Charlotte bows to show respect and introduces herself. To her surprise, Carlyle expresses gratitude and, after thanking her, instructs Theo to accompany him. With an excited tone, Theo asks Charlotte if she would join them. Oh, there's no going back now. Theo is too attached to her like a kid to his mom. However, he explains to the child that only he and Theo will be going home since Charlotte resides in that house. This prompts Theo to decline the offer to go home, firmly deciding to stay with Charlotte instead. Despite attempts to persuade him to leave, Theo keeps pushing Carlyle away because he wants Charlotte to remain with them. His distress escalates into hysterical crying and tantrums, making it challenging for them to calm him down. Suddenly, he ceases all movement, his eyes remaining wide open. He neither sleeps nor responds, staring blankly into space. I don't know, but I find this funny that he's unconscious after resisting to what he wants. Witnessing Theo's alarming condition, both Charlotte and Carlyle are deeply concerned. Charlotte, in an attempt to wake him up, shakes him vigorously. Unexpectedly, a faint light emerges after a few seconds of Charlotte holding Theo's hand. Carlyle is deep in shock that he starts holding her hand too. The same with Theo's. Carlyle's hands glow upon Charlotte's touch. Does she possess some divine powers of healing or what? Later that day, Theo eventually falls asleep, but Charlotte remains puzzled about the inexplicable light that appeared when she held both Theo and Carlyle's hands. Moments later, Carlyle enters the room looking intently at her. In her defense, she starts telling the truth that she doesn't know anything about it. Suddenly, Carlyle asks her about a phrase and a suitable person behind it. At this moment, Charlotte knows that she's in a state of emergency, a kind of signal that she might upset him with one wrong move. Magicians use their inner energy called mana to do magic, but it's a delicate job, so it's important to learn how to control mana first. However, some people, a small group, can still use magic even if they don't have mana. They're called Roseto. They got special powers from the first magicians, but there's a big problem. If their mana suddenly explodes, their body gets too hot, and it makes them really sick. If they don't do something about it, they could even die. That is what happened to Theo. When Theo accidentally hurt the Viscount, Charlotte figured out her theory. If Theo is a Roseto, it would explain everything. Charlotte finally understood why the assassins didn't leave any magic signs. It's probably because Theo's mana exploded. Poor kid. He must have been very scared to see dead bodies around him that time. It also explains the blood splatters on his clothes. This also clarifies Theo's tattoo on his back, which is a pattern that represents a Roseto. Charlotte gazes at her hand, contemplating the idea that she might be a suitable person, someone necessary for a Roseto who struggles to control mana on their own. The evidence is too convincing to ignore. In this moment, Charlotte realizes that she's no longer just an ordinary noble existing on the sidelines of the story. She is now deeply intertwined with the main character's life. Carlyle proposes that until Theo learns to control his mana, Charlotte should take on the role of the Duchess in the Heinst family. OMG, this happened sooner than expected. Later that night, Charlotte remains awake, pondering Carlyle's earlier proposition. She begins to envision how her life might unfold as a Duchess. Considering the option of being a home teacher instead, Carlyle informs her that home teachers can't unite the Heinst Knights. Approaching her, the closing distance leaves her speechless and stunned. He earnestly pleads for her acceptance, expressing concern as an older brother that Theo might have another mana explosion. To sweeten the deal, he offers a fair payment. Considering her debts and the need to protect her child, Charlotte, after some contemplation, requests time to think. And so, a 5-year marriage contract is proposed, and despite the late hour, she continues to weigh the benefits of the substantial payment for herself and her family. The next day, Carlyle returns to inquire about her decision. With a smile and unwavering certainty, Charlotte accepts the offer. However, Charlotte has some conditions to set. Her first condition may sound ironic. No marriage. She clarifies that she won't agree to marriage without being engaged first. This leads them into a discussion about the engagement, as Carlyle is eager to move things forward despite the standard 1-year engagement period. In the back of her mind, Charlotte recalls the novel's plot, realizing that within a year, Carlyle may not need her anymore. According to her memory, Penelope, the novel's heroine, appears about half a year after Theo's attack, and their meeting takes place at a palace banquet. In the original novel, Carlyle tormented himself with the sadness of losing Theo. At that time, he didn't know about the Roseto yet. Lost in thoughts about what might happen, Charlotte looks down, pondering the future. Carlyle doesn't know he's a Roseto, making things even more complicated. While deep in thought, a hand touches her, bringing her back to the present. Apologizing for not paying attention, Charlotte adds another condition, which Carlyle agrees to. With everything settled, she signs the contract, but now a new worry pops up. How to convince her parents about this decision? Since her dad isn't interested in power, she knows convincing him won't be a piece of cake. An idea crosses Charlotte's mind about the national founding ceremony they both attended. They decide to create a convincing love story to support their contract. Suddenly, Carlyle takes out a necklace from his coat, showing it to Charlotte and handing it to her. This necklace is a secret between them, known only to Carlyle. Their plan is carefully thought out, and they shake hands as a final agreement. But something's been bothering Carlyle about what happened in the national founding ceremony. That evening, Charlotte's father returns home, happily greeting his daughter. Amidst their joyful bonding, the Viscount appears with a smirking face, demanding money and threatening her with increased interest. His eyes widen in shock as she hands him a check with the complete amount, including the interest. He can't believe what he's seeing, never expecting her to have such a large sum of money in just a few days. With a proud air, she displays that she's more than capable of paying him. Everyone is taken aback when the Viscount tears the check in frustration. His anger intensifies and he grabs Charlotte's father by the collar, hurling insulting words in a fit of rage. Unable to accept that Charlotte's family could pay him in full, he loses control, behaving like a wild beast and even resorting to threatening Charlotte. However, Carlyle arrives, asking what he's doing to his fiancée. Wow, is this a knight in shining armor to the rescue? The Viscount's reaction is priceless, as if he's just heard impossible news. His jaw drops and his eyes register shock. Good thing he didn't pee in his pants. Charlotte's father is equally surprised by the sudden appearance and the news of his daughter having a fiancé. His eyes widen, ready to burst with anger. Charlotte stammers, attempting to explain to her father. Then she glares at Carlyle, silently communicating through her eyes that what he did was a wrong move. Carlyle, who has been investigating the Rania family, figures out that Baron Rania is someone who deeply cares for his daughter. The three of them sit down to chat, and the Baron keeps asking questions about how Charlotte and Carlyle ended up together. He genuinely wants to know if the Duke truly cares for his daughter. Charlotte and Carlyle look at each other, trying to signal their answers and make sure they sound believable. Carlyle, who's good at acting, speaks convincingly. At home, the investigation is still ongoing about the assassination. Aside from that, he also made an investigation about the Rania family. Charlotte's family isn't that well off. They are in debt from a man who proposes marriage to the Baron's daughter as a payment. Also, it turns out that Charlotte sold her sapphire jewels just to help a kid she just met. If she was able to sell such jewels, why couldn't she use it to pay the debt? Carlyle's assistant explains that it was a gift to her coming of age, so the Baroness did all she could not to sell it. She has such a pure heart. We must protect her at all costs. Just then, Carlyle orders his assistant to search for all the sapphire jewels and to bring them to him immediately. When the assistant leaves through the door, the Duke feels a familiar pain that only went away when he held Charlotte's hands. Does this mean they're going to hold hands all the time? Oh, I'm being nosy here. Outside, we can see how happy Theo is with Charlotte. However, as they are playing, a vase falls off from the balcony towards Theo's head. Carlyle is about to intervene when Charlotte beats him to it. In a heart-stopping moment, Charlotte swoops in to shield Theo from the falling vase, her worries etched across her face. Heroically, she manages to save him, but in the process, the vase grazes her, leaving a bleeding cut. The sacrifice doesn't end there. As the room spins, Charlotte, on the brink of fainting, is caught in Carlyle's sturdy embrace. Summoning help, Carlyle swiftly commands a maid to dial the hospital. As Charlotte regains consciousness, her first sight is Theo's concerned gaze. With a reassuring smile, she assures him she's fine, soothing his worried heart. However, she clearly remembers that Carlyle held her hand for some time, confused as to why he did something like that. Perhaps he's trying to confirm her ability to calm his aching body. The following day unfolds with a touch of bittersweet creativity. Charlotte begins a whimsical farewell to her cherished maids, promising a return in half a year. With a nostalgic glance around the house, she strives to capture every detail before her departure, embracing the fleeting beauty of the moment. She then tenderly exchanges farewell with her parents, whose eyes glisten with tears as they watch their daughter prepare to leave the home they've shared. The ache of parting is softened by the understanding that they support her decision, even if they'll dearly miss their only daughter. Oh, she's surely loved in their home. I wonder how hard it is for her parents who don't have any choice but to let her go. As Charlotte turns away, tears stream down her face. Meeting with the Duke to depart, she's surprised to find the jewelry she once tried to sell. She further sobs in joy, thanking Carlyle for bringing it back to her. In the carriage, a mix of emotions is evident on her face. Alongside her is Theo, and she assures them both with a smile that they'll now be living together. She then vows to herself that no matter what happens, given how the life in the capital isn't as smooth as it is, she will definitely return to her home. Beneath the big dark sky, Charlotte's carriage quietly travels through the night, like a cozy bubble drifting through the quiet darkness. Charlotte looks out of the window while Theo peacefully sleeps in her lap. Memories pop up of the strange timings when a flower pot fell on her head, coinciding with how he almost choked on his cookies while happily savoring it. No matter how coincidental it is, it still feels strange. Charlotte wonders why these strange things always happen around Theo. Could it be because he's a kid who wasn't supposed to survive and now destiny is playing tricks on him? Even in his sleep, Theo mumbles for Charlotte, making her promise to keep him safe. Oh, what a sweet little boy! Now, Charlotte is more determined to protect him. After all, he's just a kid and not Carlyle's wake-up call. Suddenly, the carriage stops and Carlyle says they've reached an undisclosed place. Gently waking Theo, Charlotte shares the news that they're home. But when Carlyle tries to take Theo, he surprises everyone by insisting on staying with Charlotte, leaving Carlyle in a state of confusion. It's so funny how he spent day and night searching for his little brother, and now Theo's clinging to a stranger he just met days ago. Moving on, in the middle of the forest, a magical circle appears. Carlyle offers his hand to Charlotte, and when she opens her eyes again, they're in Carlyle's and Theo's home, a place wrapped in the magic of the quiet night. With a determined face, Charlotte's ready to jump to the original novel. Theo then proudly shows Charlotte his room and gives her a teddy bear from his brother. Somehow, it's familiar to her, but she didn't put much thought into it. Suddenly, Hein, a magician, comes to heal Charlotte's injury with magic. She then pats Theo's head, making him happy that she's not hurt anymore. Just then, she remembers that in the original novel, Penelope condensed her power and turns it into a magic stone. And so, Charlotte asks Hein to help her learn how to control her mana to make a protective stone. Hein happily agrees, but asks for time to talk to the Duke. As much as they want to, they could start right away, but since Theo is sleeping, holding on to Charlotte, they decide to wait until he's in bed. To not wake Theo, Charlotte goes outside. Suddenly, Emma, a concerned maid, rushes to her, guiding her to a room prepared by the Heinst family. Dresses and jewelry fill the room, surprising both Charlotte and Emma. Emma is particularly enamored with the room, finding things she likes. However, something catches Charlotte's eye, and despite Emma, whether she's happy about it or not, it becomes evident that Charlotte seems burdened. For her, it's such a waste given that Penelope will introduce herself soon. Their relationship with Carlyle is just a contract, so Charlotte feels burdened about it, leading her to step outside for a moment. Charlotte seeks information about Carlyle from the butler, Robert, but he's occupied with Carlyle's assistant, Lord Chase. Still, she asks Robert to inform her if they'll be back at the mansion. Also, she expresses her desire to see the Saintess soon, hoping to uncover the cause of Theo's misfortunes. Expressing her wish for Theo's and the Duke's happiness, Charlotte surprises Robert. He assures her he'll make arrangements for her to meet the Saintess within a week. Suddenly, a lady named Irina Rayner approaches Charlotte, introducing herself and offering assistance to tour around the mansion. Irina manages the family on behalf of the vacant mistress, adding a new dynamic to the unfolding situation. She takes Charlotte on a tour, to which she curiously thinks about distinct interactions from those with Lord Chase. Irina senses Charlotte's thoughts, revealing that she and Chase are a married couple. You got me there for a moment. I thought she's going to be a wicked villain to our lovely Charlotte. The revelation shocks Charlotte, who hadn't imagined Irina's marital status. Irina in turn points out Charlotte's own unspoken marriage. The conversation shifts to Charlotte's meeting with Carlyle, and Irina, curious about the Duke's personality, offers to help Charlotte understand him better. In Carlyle's room, bloodied hands hint at a mysterious event. Chase proposes eliminating the last piece of evidence, but Carlyle dismisses the idea, stating the person knows nothing, so he won't care if he kills him or not. While contemplating in his chair, Chase reveals that there's a traitor among the employees. Otherwise, his destination wouldn't be exposed. Chase suggests asking for Charlotte's help, but Carlyle firmly says no. Even though Chase's opinion is reasonable, somehow he doesn't like putting her in danger that would greatly affect Theo's life at stake. Is that it, or is there more to it? It's too early to judge now, but what do you guys think? As soon as Chase leaves, Carlyle feels his body getting pretty exhausted, like a terrible headache that's been going on forever. However, he remembers holding hands with her can soothe the pain. As much as he wants to hold her hand, he thinks she must be asleep in her room by now. Still, he's concerned about Charlotte's well-being, so he heads to her room to check on her. Carlyle is about to know, but then he hears Emma going out from Charlotte's room. Emma wonders if there were any footsteps. Hiding, the Duke breathes a sigh of relief, feeling a bit nervous about facing Charlotte. On a rainy day, Theo curiously asks why everyone's wearing black. Charlotte comforts him, reminding him of the night they're saying goodbye to. Then, they go to the cemetery where Carlyle and everyone else are for the knight's funeral. Carlyle stands by the knight's coffin, soaking wet in the rain, and seemingly not too emotional. Since he was young, he was taught to hide emotions. That's why he's able to stand there like it's nothing. However, that is not the truth. Even Charlotte can tell that he looks so sad. I somehow feel bad for him. He's bottling it all inside with no one to talk to. Just then, Charlotte and Theo arrive, and Theo innocently asks if the knight is asleep. Ignorance is really bliss. Carlyle then advises Theo to say goodbye. Noticing Carlyle's lack of expression, Charlotte understands that he can't let out his emotions as easily as others do because no one wants to offer their sympathy too. He can't expect comfort from others if it isn't a command. Of course, he doesn't want that either. This time, Charlotte offers him her handkerchief, saying it's to shield from the hot sun, even though it's raining. Carlyle grabs Charlotte's hand where the handkerchief is, probably trying to soothe the lingering pain within himself. However, he's shocked to see a familiar pattern embroidered on the handkerchief, so he asks if she personally made it, to which she positively responds. Carlyle quickly leaves for his office, saying that he'll just wash it before returning the handkerchief. In his office, he immediately pulls out the drawer, only to find another handkerchief with the same design. The question is, if he got it from Charlotte, when did they meet? And why is he keeping it all this time? Days later, Theo and Charlotte share muffins. Charlotte thinks about why Carlyle took her handkerchief but didn't use it, though she decides not to dwell on it. When Theo asks about learning magic, Charlotte says he already had a session the day before. Theo happily remembers his magical lesson, and he praises himself as the best. Suddenly, a red-haired woman named Celine, Charlotte's escort, walks in. Celine brings a box of sweets to impress Theo and Charlotte. Even though Theo is a bit scared, Charlotte encourages him to thank Celine for the treats. Celine is getting fond of the little kid, who's obviously enchanted by his adorable side. Then, Celine mentions Theo's brother and suggests watching him training in the gym. At the gym, they watch Carlyle gracefully defeat his practice partner. Oh, God, as if the sun's not enough to set the temperature higher. It's so hot in here, guys. Carlyle notices Charlotte, wondering why she's around. God, the way he stares makes my knees wobble. Just kidding, guys. Theo excitedly waves at his brother, and Carlyle, wiping away his sweat, approaches them. Charlotte, taken by Carlyle's presence, wonders if his shoulders are as broad as ever. Carlyle just stands tall, his posture exuding confidence and strength. His eyes, deep and expressive, seem to hold a wealth of experiences. Beneath a well-defined brow, those eyes reveal a mix of determination and a hint of mystery. His hair, though messy as sweat trickles down, frames his face, adding a touch of sophistication to his overall appearance. Before she can even respond, Celine interrupts, asking if Charlotte is feeling hot, noticing her cheeks turning red. Charlotte denies it, claiming it's nothing unusual. I can't with Carlyle's smirk. What about my heart, sir? Carlyle then lifts Theo, and Theo expresses their wish to see Carlyle fencing. Carlyle suggests Charlotte to move into the shaded area to avoid the heat. Charlotte is flustered, and Celine playfully teases her about feeling hot. Then the fencing spectacle begins, captivating Charlotte as she watches from up close. Carlyle hands Theo a stick to mimic fencing, and he energetically swings it around. In a near slip, both Carlyle and Charlotte instinctively reach out, their hands accidentally brushing. Suddenly, a wooden sword hurtles toward Theo. In a quick reaction, Carlyle grabs Celine's swords to deflect the flying wooden sword. Charlotte, worried for Theo, suggests sending him to the Saintess promptly. Carlyle promptly arranges for a carriage to the temple. Along the journey, he questions Charlotte about the urgency. Charlotte, unable to reveal the true reason that in the original novel that Theo should have died, simply mentions her concern for Theo. Upon arriving at the temple, Charlotte becomes nervous. Inside, she is captivated by a glass pane depicting the goddess of destiny. One untangles the thread, the other weaves fate on the thread, and the other one who judges one's fate. Suddenly, a servant of the goddess Teresa introduces herself, catching Theo's fascination. He is even calling her Angel. So cute. However, as soon as Teresa glances at Charlotte, she can't believe what she sees. Charlotte, on the other hand, is rather confused about what she's referring to. Charlotte, feeling a weird vibe, asks Teresa if something's wrong. Teresa, trying to brush it off, says she's just mistaken, leaving Charlotte confused. Now focusing on little Theo, Teresa asks for his hands to give him a blessing. She kisses Theo's forehead, and he suddenly dozes off, sleeping like a baby. Charlotte screams, but Teresa assures her that he's asleep and will be better when he wakes up. Carlyle, carrying the sleepy Theo, expresses his gratitude to Teresa. After that magical moment, Teresa insists Charlotte should get a blessing too. Asking for an audience alone in a room, Teresa's gentle expression turns into something more serious. She stares at Charlotte like she's trying to read her mind. In a mysterious tone, Teresa reveals that when she checked Theo earlier, she found out that his string of fate was almost cut, explaining as to why strange things always happen to the kid. Shocked, Charlotte asks if Theo's okay. Teresa explains more about the magical threads and how she strengthens it with the blessing of the goddess, making Charlotte feel a bit better. But the conversation takes a strange turn. Teresa, seeming like she knows some cosmic secrets, asks Charlotte about why she's in their world. At this point, Teresa knows that Charlotte's string was also cut off and reconnected to another string with a different color. Also, the present Charlotte isn't the original one, and the original soul now ascends to the goddess. Charlotte has no other choice but to tell the truth. 3 years ago, she died in a traffic accident that happened in another dimension. She lost consciousness after the car hit her, but when she woke up, she was already in this world. Perhaps the real Charlotte also entered her life at the same time. After telling her story, Charlotte thinks she won't believe it, but Teresa assures her it's their little secret. Turns out, Teresa just got curious as to why she shows up in their world, but maybe the goddess has another reason for it. As a sign of trust, Teresa gives Charlotte a blessing with a gentle kiss on her hand, also making her string stronger. However, Teresa warns her to be careful because her string of fate is made up of 2 strings. She'll never know when the 2 strings will split. Does this mean her death? Shock and fear dawn on Charlotte, but as she opens the door wider, Teresa disappears without a trace like a mysterious fog. Back in the carriage, Carlyle warns Charlotte to stay put because there's trouble. Not knowing how to calm herself while also comforting the child, Charlotte shakingly sings a children's song, all while her body shivers in fear. Oh God, why does this always happen to them? After some time, Carlyle manages to protect them from danger and safely takes them home. When Emma asks if Charlotte's okay, out of the blue, she collapses. Charlotte lies on her bed, trapped in a nightmare, desperately calling for help in her sleep. Carlyle rushes to her side, comforting her by gently holding her hand. This simple gesture brings solace to Charlotte, who gradually eases into a more restful sleep. Carlyle, concerned about the cause of Charlotte's distress, reflects about all the recent events which are too much for her. Returning to his office, Carlyle summons his trusted aides, Celine and Chase, to discuss the recent raid. Carlyle identifies 3 maids: Jessie, who works in the kitchen, Ellie, employed in the laundry room, and Hazel, a lady's maid, as potential spies who keep feeding information to the trained assassins who raided the carriage and Theo. What could be in this innocent child that all these assassins want? He then orders further investigation into these 3, suspecting their involvement in the recent disturbances. Despite Chase's suggestion to involve Charlotte in their affairs, Carlyle insists on keeping her out of harm's way. He emphasizes that, regardless of the situation, Charlotte should not be entangled in their covert operations. He's rather concerned. How did the heartless Duke turn out this way? As the meeting concludes, Celine contemplates the difficulty of spying on the maids. Charlotte, sensing something is amiss, approaches Celine. In a quiet corridor, Charlotte proposes a walk outside in the sunny weather with Theo. Celine offers assistance in order to protect her, all while observing the potential servants in the hall. Upon reaching Charlotte's room, Charlotte discloses her suspicion about the 3 maids. Celine initially denies it, but Charlotte, perceptive and determined, coaxes the truth from her. Celine is too stunned to deny it any longer. She clearly didn't expect Charlotte to be this smart. Understanding the intricacy of the situation, Charlotte expresses her willingness to help uncover the spies. Charlotte acknowledges Carlyle's hesitancy in sharing such matters with her, realizing they aren't yet close enough for him to fully trust her. Celine, on Carlyle's behalf, emphasizes his concern for Charlotte's safety. Even for a professional assassin like her, she can still sense something romantic going on. How cute. Determined, Charlotte vows to keep the revelation a secret. Celine acknowledges that Carlyle would be displeased if he knew Charlotte was privy to such information. Charlotte, showing resilience, assures Celine that she won't betray the trust. Celine, seeking assistance, proposes involving Emma as a spy. In order to learn the world of servants, one must be used. Following Charlotte's lead, Emma innocently asks Ellie for a favor. Emma, craftily executing her role, approaches Ellie in the laundry room and points out a stain on Charlotte's dress. She informs Ellie that Charlotte plans to visit Legis Street with Theo and requests her to wash the dress promptly. Ellie, confident and willing, assures Emma that she'll handle it with care. Before leaving, Emma emphasizes the need for secrecy, as the outing is meant to be a surprise. Moving on to the kitchen, Emma finds Jessie and assigns her the task of preparing a meal box for Charlotte. Emma explains that it's a surprise for the Duke, and Jessie, skilled in the culinary arts, promises to whip up a delightful meal in no time. As with Ellie, Emma urges Jessie not to share the news with anyone. In the pursuit of completing the surprise, Charlotte engages with Hazel, seeking advice on where to buy clothes for the Duke. Hazel recommends a store on Duchess Street and gladly agrees to keep the surprise under wraps. Once Hazel leaves, Emma converses with Charlotte, who commends her for her dedicated efforts. Emma expresses concern about the risks involved, but Charlotte reassures her, confident that Hein will lend assistance if needed. To divert attention and ensure their safety, Charlotte employs a clever tactic, creating a decoy of Theo using a teddy bear wrapped in cloth. With the help of Hein's magic, Charlotte ventures out with the decoy, awaiting the assassin's moves. When Charlotte is transported back to the mansion, Theo greets her with a warm hug. Charlotte is confident to successfully complete the first phase of their plan. Now, they await news about the 3 carriages that have been dispatched to different locations. Turns out, she's not someone to mess with. As anticipated, the first carriage falls victim to a raid by spies, but the well-coordinated efforts of the knights foil their plans. Celine promptly reports the successful counteraction to Carlyle, who, intrigued, inquires about the information gathered from the captured spies. The discovery of the traitor among the maids sends shockwaves through Carlyle's household, as Ellie is revealed as the culprit, driven by the need to support her ailing siblings. It's always those who are desperate to support their loved ones. Why can't people just help without letting them do such grievous things? Still, Carlyle seeks to unravel the deeper layers of this conspiracy, turning to Celine for information. Celine notices a distinctive pattern on the assassin's body, a mark resembling the poisonous plant known as the Hisans flower. Carlyle, recognizing the mark as belonging to the notorious Deros Guild, understands that their involvement goes beyond mere theft to include assassination. Determined to confront the source of this threat, Carlyle instructs Celine to lead an immediate expedition to the Deros Guild's base. Upon arrival, the Duke and Celine set fire to the Guild's stronghold, a brutal but necessary move to dismantle the threat. Despite their attempts to extract information from the leader of the Guild, he remains tight-lipped, refusing to disclose the identity of the mastermind behind the attacks. In a defiant act, the assassin points out how Carlyle keeps holding grudges before he faces his death. Returning with documents seized from the base, Celine discloses to Carlyle that Charlotte is aware of the situation. Anxious about Charlotte's safety, Carlyle rushes to the mansion and to her room. Before he can knock, Charlotte opens the door, surprised at the Duke's presence. He notices a bloodstain on his wrist, so he hastily conceals it behind his back. He then confronts her about the plan to interfere with the carriage, a revelation supposedly disclosed by Celine. Bewildered, Charlotte denies any involvement, expressing astonishment at Celine's statements. Carlyle, deeply concerned for her safety, emphasizes the potential consequences of failure and inquires about Theo's welfare. Charlotte, realizing her oversight, apologizes, pledging to be more cautious moving forward. Carlyle, sighing in understanding, acknowledges the gravity of the situation. In an attempt to make amends, Carlyle asks how he can repay her for the inconvenience. Without hesitation, Charlotte requests access to Carlyle's personal reading room. The following day, she ventures into the designated space, discovering a specific book. However, upon opening it, she didn't anticipate the contents inside. She can't read a single thing! Charlotte finds herself asking for Sir Hein's assistance when she cannot read the book written in the ancient language. However, Hein refuses to translate it for her. Since the book belongs to the Duke's personal reading room, he cannot simply divulge its contents. Still persistent as ever, she asks how she may be able to read it. Aside from Hein, Duke Carlyle himself is able to read the ancient language after being taught from a young age. The only way for her to know its contents would be to ask the Duke to read it to her. Okay, I'm starting to like where this is going. Mouth agape, she is astounded at the idea, but before she can press further, Theo arrives and interrupts her and Hein. As Charlotte practices her magic, she senses the mana emanating from within her. However, she is not able to completely wield it. Sensing Charlotte's distress, Theo places a hand on her stomach. Suddenly, Theo wields the surrounding magic almost as if it were the easiest feat. Hein encourages her not to lose hope, for she too will be able to sense the mana more clearly in the future. Later that night, Charlotte intercepts Carlyle as he arrives. He's the only person who could tell her of the book's contents. She really is serious about getting the book translated. Hearing her, Carlyle admits that he knew the book was written in an ancient language. Leading her into the reading room, he agrees to read the book to her. As he reads through the book, Charlotte's interest falls on the symbol of the Rosetto. She remarks that it is the same symbol that adorns Theo's body. At this point, both shift their conversation to Theo's magical abilities. Being born as a Rosetto, Theo has always been able to activate his mana even before turning a year old. As their conversation progresses, Charlotte's interest shifts to finding a book related to the Destined One. However, being alone with Carlyle in the library means that she has difficulty focusing. Girl, I can't blame you, just look at him! But she loses her focus even more when he suddenly appears closely behind her. Carlyle appears behind Charlotte in close proximity. Face to face with each other, Charlotte blushes and closes her eyes at how close he is getting. But suddenly, her nervousness is dispelled when all he does is reach for a book behind her. Oh, come on! The romantic suspense was almost at its peak! Grabbing the book, Carlyle brings it back to their table where he reads its contents to Charlotte. He begins by telling her all about the Destined One. It turns out that the Destined One is a person who overcame death. Once this happens, the person's body changes wherein it is capable of suppressing mana. Without thinking much of it, he brings up Charlotte's terrible fever 3 years ago. He deduces that perhaps she became the Destined One after her life-threatening experience. She ponders his words carefully. As soon as she became the Destined One, Theo had managed to arrive at Rania Manor. Could this all be a coincidence, or is fate playing a game on all of them? Ceasing their reading, Carlyle hovers his arm for Charlotte to take as they make their way back to their separate quarters. As they walk hand in hand, she wonders if it was also inevitable for her to have met Carlyle. The next morning, Charlotte and Theo spend time with Irina and her son Danny. While both children eat, she remembers an earlier conversation with Celine. Celine informs her that the people behind the recent attacks threatening Theo's life is Deiros, a guild of mercenaries harboring a grudge against the Heinst family. Geez, don't they have a conscience to target a child just because of a grudge? Seeing the worried look on Charlotte's face, Celine reassures her that the threat has been dealt with accordingly. Additionally, Celine mentions that Carlyle worries for Charlotte, especially if she might be put in danger because of her attempts at being involved in the matter. He really does care a great deal for her. Their conversation is cut short without even getting to inquire more about Celine's last statement. As everyone begins to eat, she notices Theo developing a picky attitude toward his food. How could he throw away food so easily like that? Even if they are dislikable vegetables, it's still not a reason to easily cast them away. Suddenly, an idea springs to her mind. She will teach Theo a lesson, and what better way to do it than letting Theo grow his own vegetables? Robert, the butler, listens to Charlotte's idea of immersing Theo in farming experiences. However, with such a rigorous task like that, he advises her to wait for Carlyle's approval. But with Carlyle's busy schedule lately, it would be difficult to meet him freely. Charlotte doesn't let this dampen her spirit, so she eagerly awaits his return. As the day grows later and later, she realizes that the sun is about to rise, but he still hasn't returned. Fortunately, as if the world heard her pleas, Robert comes in to inform her that the Duke has recently just returned. She doesn't want to delay anything, so she hurriedly makes her way to the Duke's workspace to ask him about her idea. When she knocks, Carlyle is surprised to see her. I mean, I'd be surprised too. It's already late after all. Charlotte finds the atmosphere extremely awkward as they sit across from each other. There's something about the deafening silence that makes her uncomfortable. Or maybe it's his piercing gaze that's boring right through her? I would start melting like an ice cream if he stared at me like that. Carlyle is first to break the ice. However, when Charlotte looks around and sees his workspace swamped with papers, she decides to delay her sharing for a little while. She realizes that he must have been too busy with all this piled up on his plate. Did he even have time to eat? Out of the blue, she shares that she is hungry, and she invites Carlyle to have a meal with her despite the late hour. Hearing this, he complies and asks Robert to prepare something simple for them. While waiting for their food, she brings up her idea of immersing Theo in farming. Aside from it being fun, it will teach Theo values and hopefully will dispel his pickiness of food. Pondering on her suggestion, Carlyle doesn't have any problems with it, so he agrees at once. Anything for her, of course. He even supports it so much to the extent that he will let the gardeners prepare for her plan as well. Just as they finish their talk, Robert arrives with their meal. The two eat in silence, with Charlotte feigning hunger the entire time. When she finishes, she bids him a good night and leaves him to his work. Carlyle isn't an oblivious person, so when Charlotte leaves a hefty portion of food on her plate, he quickly realizes that she staged this entire dinner, just so she can make sure he was eating well despite his business. Looking at the now empty room, he acknowledges that just moments earlier he had been happy. But all of a sudden when she's gone, it feels empty. Since when had he been feeling this way? It's so obvious he's starting to like her. At the crack of dawn, Charlotte awakes to the sound of her room door opening. She is shocked when Theo suddenly bounces on her with excitement. Despite the early hour, his surge of energy for farming is already at its peak. I really love how enthusiastic of a child Theo is. He's so cute. Trying to calm him down a bit, she offers to wait it out, to sleep with her for the time being. As soon as the sun would rise, then they'd go farming. That morning, Theo and Charlotte immediately make their way to the garden. When he steps foot in the garden, he quickly inspects the seeds they had planted a day before. To his surprise, the seedlings actually grew overnight. Seeing his happy smile, Charlotte decides that her and the gardener's efforts were worth it. Turns out, the day they planted the seeds, Charlotte had asked the gardeners a favor. She knew that Theo was too excited and that perhaps he'd be sad to know that seeds don't grow overnight. Thanks to the gardeners who replaced each seed with a seedling during the night, Theo is able to showcase a smile on his face upon seeing the little seedlings. That must have taken a lot of effort to replace each seed. Later that afternoon, Carlyle comes to the garden searching for Theo. When he finds him eating tomatoes with Charlotte, the sight before him reminds him of a distant memory. Long ago, his mother used to roam the garden carrying a baby, Theo. Back then, having his mother doting on Theo was some of the most peaceful days he'd had. Things had not been the same ever since she passed. For some reason, it was almost as if spring had died away with their mother. I can't imagine how much he must have grieved for her. But just when he thinks he will never see spring again, Charlotte comes into view. As Theo runs to him and offers to give him fresh tomatoes, all he can focus on is her. Looking at her, he feels happy but lonely at the same time. He moves closer to Charlotte and caresses her hair with his fingertips. She looks at him with wide eyes, but all he can think about is wanting to hold her tight so that she won't go away. Not now, not ever. Ants are surely coming after Carlyle because of how sweet he is. Relationship progress, y'all! A surge of blush can't help but make its way to Charlotte's cheeks as Carlyle keeps holding onto her hair. Once more, she calls his name to gain his attention. Hearing her, he snaps out of his current state. He steps away and uses a leaf attached to her hair as an excuse. This Duke sure can be lame. As he leaves the garden, Charlotte takes a moment to recover from that breath-hitching moment. How could such a wholesome and romantic interaction vanish in the span of seconds? At dinner, Theo proudly shares the peas he grew. It seems that immersing Theo in farming really did help him overcome being picky. While everyone dines, Charlotte can't help but wonder how the Duke found the time to eat with Theo. Could it be that he actually listened to her words the night before when she suggested that he eat with his brother more often? Pushing back these thoughts, she shakes her head. There's no way he would listen to her, right? He's probably doing all this for Theo's sake. Charlotte, if only you knew how he really felt. When dinner ends, Carlyle excuses himself early so that he may attend to work matters. But it seems that Charlotte is stopping him. Grabbing his hand with so much urgency, this gives her Carlyle's undivided attention. The way she grabbed him was almost as if she didn't want him to leave. Not knowing why she did it in the first place, she tries to ease the situation by giving him a heads up about tomorrow's menu. Back in her room later that night, she receives a letter from her brother Isaac. It takes her a while to open the letter out of anxiety about its contents. What could her brothers have written to her? Reading the letter, she finds that her brothers are in turmoil at her situation. Although they are proud of how she was quick to handle the conflicts while they were away, they still couldn't wrap their heads around her engagement. Ah, yes, typical brothers being protective of their little sister. How cute. Continuing further, she reads that her brothers want to meet with her at a cafe downtown. Had the circumstances been different, she wouldn't hesitate to meet with her brothers. However, she has to look after herself now so she's not to endanger Theo as well. With determined resolve, Charlotte writes back to Isaac that she's not going to their meeting place. However, it will be them who will go to her at Heinst's mansion. The following day, two blue-haired men set foot on the Heinst mansion. The Rania brothers have arrived to meet their sister. The Rania brothers, Isaac and Jake, appear to be calm and composed individuals. But looks and reality really do fool people because suddenly, Jake is making a commotion at the mansion. Screaming his lungs out, he truly believes that Charlotte is being held against her will. When Isaac has enough of him, he asks Jake to calm down. Just in time, Charlotte walks out to greet her brothers before Jake can make a bigger scene. Inside, Jake continues raging about his sister's engagement. If he could call his sister foolish and all its synonyms, he probably would have done so by now. LOL, he's so mad at her. When Jake reminds her of her age, Charlotte doesn't back down. She reminds him that it isn't unusual for ladies her age to get engaged. Hearing this, the two begin to squabble. This is why brothers and sisters are like cats and dogs. Theo approaches the trio to come into Charlotte's defense. As Theo tries to get Jake to stop yelling at Charlotte, it seems he gets caught up squabbling with him instead. Finally, Isaac intervenes and hands Theo a box of expensive chocolates. Only then does Theo agree when Charlotte asked him to stay with Emma for a while. Alone with her siblings once more, she begins to explain to her brothers how she and Carlyle first met. Although unbeknownst to them, she is actually recounting a story of how she and a stranger met one fateful day. It was a rainy day at the Capitol during the national founding ceremony. With her brothers being knights, it was inevitable that Charlotte was left alone sometimes. While she was separated from her brothers, she took shelter from the rain inside a gift shop where a kind lady offered for her to come in. Shortly after, a man who wears a hood came to the store. According to him, he sought a gift for his younger brother who was a year old. Helpful as ever, she assisted him in picking out the right gift. Eventually, she settled on a cute brown teddy bear and offered it to the man. With no questions asked, the man took and paid for it. But when he left, she found herself running after him in the pouring rain. The sky was still gloomy as the rain continued to pour, but still, she persisted in running after the man. When she caught up with him, she quickly offered her handkerchief. She hoped that the handkerchief would help wipe away the rainwater. Looking back and forth between Charlotte and the handkerchief, the man finally took it from her. With one last wholehearted attempt, she told him that everything will be okay. As she saw the man leaving, she pondered on the words she truly wanted to tell him. She couldn't be sure, but it felt like he was holding back tears. She wanted to cheer him up and tell him to cry it out. But then again, how could she, a stranger, offer comfort to someone she barely knew? Ending her walk down memory lane, she snaps herself back to reality with her brothers. Despite her recounting how she and the Duke met, Jake doesn't believe a single bit of it as he continued to rage. I get that he's protective over her, but if he only saw how much the Duke treated Charlotte right. Finally, having had enough of Jake, she asserts herself and admits that she truly does like the Duke. This makes Jake pause from his fit. Hearing this, Isaac gets up and acknowledges what his sister just said. At the end of the day, it is Charlotte's choice to stay, but in the event that she wishes to return to her family, they'll gladly welcome her back. As her brothers motion to leave, Isaac mentions that they'll be seeing each other soon for the upcoming Kung Fu competition. The following day, Irina and Charlotte spend time at the greenhouse as Theo and Danny play with the plants. Inquisitive as ever, Irina asks why she's embroidering all of a sudden. Charlotte heartily responds that she's embroidering handkerchiefs as gifts for her brothers during the Kung Fu competition. How sweet of Charlotte to do that! Hearing this, Irina also inquires if she is making one for the Duke. Considering the Duke isn't taking part in the competition, Charlotte didn't think she would need to give him one. When their topic shifts to the coming of the competition, she tells Irina that she won't be going. She has to stay with Theo and watch over him. Bringing him to the competition would be unthinkable too. After all, she can't be too sure that all the threats endangering him are eliminated. Oh no. I can't imagine how many accidents could happen if Theo were to be out on such a big event. Always being persistent, Irina tells Charlotte she'll help. Soon enough that evening, she finds herself dining privately with Carlyle next to her and Irina across from them. What on earth is Irina up to? It's been a long time since Carlyle has dined with Irina. Naturally, he's curious if there's a reason for it. As soon as they begin to eat, Irina asks the Duke about his plans for the founding ceremony. He answers that he plans to drop by to encourage the knights and that's it. Afterward, he would go back to review more paperwork. Hearing this, Irina reacts abruptly. How could he tend to work during such a festival? For sure his fiancée would be lonely. She openly suggests to Carlyle that he should be spending time with Charlotte since this is the first Founders' Day they'll be spending together since they reunited. As Charlotte listens to Irina, she tries to reassure her that she'll be fine. However, she is taken aback when she hears Carlyle agreeing to Irina's suggestions. Yes! Now that's our Duke right there! Don't let her be lonely! Satisfied with her efforts, Irina considers her job done, seeing as how she managed to get the Duke to spend time with his fiancée. As the two women walk through the hallways, they are interrupted by a blue-haired maid, Hazel, who takes great interest in the pattern on Charlotte's handkerchief. She tells her that she's seen the exact same pattern on a handkerchief the Duke had been treasuring since a long time ago. He even made sure that Annie, his attending maid, would wash the handkerchief carefully. Could it be the same handkerchief that she gave the hooded man 2 years ago? Before matters could escalate, Irina stops Hazel in her tracks. After all, she doesn't want Charlotte to get hurt if the Duke had been keeping another woman's handkerchief all along. Shortly after, Irina barges into Carlyle's office and begins to berate him for treasuring another woman's handkerchief all this time. Had she not heard it from Charlotte and Hazel, she would have been unaware of the matter. Shocked, Carlyle asks how she and Charlotte could have possibly known about the handkerchief. Storming out, Irina can't believe Carlyle was entertaining another woman 2 years ago. As she leaves, she yells that she will never help him if Charlotte decides to break off their engagement. The following day, Charlotte and Theo ready themselves to go out and watch the fireworks. Unexpectedly, despite his busy schedule, Carlyle is also coming along. As they head out to the festival and fireworks, Charlotte wonders if their outing today will bring any changes for her and Carlyle. It should, though. After all, spending time together would bring them closer. So, guys, what do you think of this story so far? Please subscribe and turn on notifications for updates on this and all our other stories, so you can be the first to find out when they're out. Thank you so much for your support. See you in the next one!